Wow, that was seamless, wasn't it?
Well, apart from the boring sort of waffle that I've done for the last however long.
I
Good
thought,
morning.
well, good morning.
Good morning to Dr. Trevor Richards, Headmaster of All Hallows and IT wizard by all accounts.
Well, definitely not. That was my IT chap. Yeah.
Oh, well done.
Yeah.
Talk about persistence.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us this morning. And I'm conscious of the clock, so you must tell me when you need to disappear.
Not at all.
But I was sort of slightly touching on, I mean, we're living through some pretty strange times at the moment. And if I'm honest, my original interview questions have slightly been thrown out as a result, because I just think there's so much we need to cover. How's life at All Hallows, and how are your children coping in these weird times?
I think the school feels like, once you get inside the school gates, it feels very much like it did before in lots of ways. We've got 2 dining rooms, and I'm spending an hour each morning and each evening in the car park. We've got staggered drop-offs and all those sorts of things.
Sure.
But actually, for the most part, school is almost the ultimate bubble. I get in the car at the end of the day and turn on Radio 4 and, oh my goodness,
Sure.
But for the children here, it's really important that we're there to answer their questions and think about their well-being. But in essence, we're the security, and the routines of school life and the care and the nurturing that goes on here is absolutely critical at the moment. I think it's just really important that they're, for the most part, getting on with life, and we're dealing with any queries or concerns that come up from them. And that's what they seem to be doing for the most part.
They're pretty resilient, aren't they?
Yeah, incredibly adaptable. When I went into the classroom the other day down in year 2 and 3, they were more worried about whether Christmas was cancelled than COVID, because how is Santa going to get around the COVID regulations?
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's a huge concern.
So I think in that sense, if that's the level of their concern, we're doing a good job, and that's absolutely right. We should be worrying up here.
Yeah. And let them be children get on with life, exactly. Yeah. And what sort of percentage boarders do you have, Trevor? Are you
about it's between 25 and 30. We're a school of about 265 typically, but our flexi boarding is absolutely flourishing. So typically in the boarding house, we would have between 40 and 45 children a night, and 25 to 30 full boarders. About 9 of which come from overseas, either expats or from Europe. So we run a couple of quarantines this term to make sure some of them will return home a week early to the European countries, so that they can have some proper time with their families where they're not constrained. But yeah, it's about full-time boarders. It's about 25 to 30.
That sounds pretty good. And who or what originally inspired you into teaching and headmaster? I know you were deputy head at All Hallows previously, weren't you? And then came head. So what was the sort of pathway?
I think, like most teachers, and certainly most heads, they want to make a difference. And that sounds very twee, but I was fortunate enough. I'm state school educated, and I was fortunate enough to, throughout my sort of development, to have some amazing teachers that were not only really good practitioners, but took the time to get to know individual pupils and find out almost what makes them tick, and translate their passion for their particular subjects to them. And I do some lecturing at the University of Buckingham around psychology as part of their PGCE program, and one of the first things I do is get them to put their hand up if they're now teaching the subject that their favourite teacher taught. And it's about 85%.
Really? How amazing.
That tells you it's not just about content and a particular subject. There's also something about a relationship between you and that teacher that's really important, and them going the extra mile for you. Did that. Absolutely. And I found that absolutely inspiring, and ended up in teaching at the end of university.
And you're a trained educational psychologist.
I am.
So, I mean, that I find fascinating in itself, but also it must give you a huge insight to children's behaviour and how they might react to certain events and situations. Do you feel it gives you a real sort of an inside track?
I think it does, and I think, again, the best teachers are almost amateur psychologists.
Yeah.
They're beyond behaviour and beyond what they see on a spreadsheet sometimes in terms of progress. And they're thinking about all those things that the sort of traits underneath that, whether it's confidence or well-being or motivation. So I did an Open University degree in my 30s after qualifying and becoming a geography teacher, and then went off back to university in Bristol and trained to be an EP. And it was transformative to me in terms of the way that I looked at what I was doing, from the basics of learning, but also, again, reinforcing that importance that really great teaching and learning is a social process. And you have to think underneath that behaviour. So certainly at All Hallows, you won't hear staff talking about naughty children or lazy children. It's about their behaviour. And the next question is, so what? So what are we going to do about that as professionals? What are the things that we can change around that child to bring about some change in them? And parents are a key part of that process as well. It's a real partnership. So it does get you to look at child development and learning differently. I think it's much broader than that typical classroom focus and on measuring results and assessments and those sorts of things, which tend, I think, to lead you down a very narrow pathway in terms of thinking about what's going on in your classroom.
And do you think by default, do you then also attract children that need a bit more breadth and depth, or do you think do you think you appeal to everyone? I think
it's a real myth that schools can't be amazing with a real broad range of children. About 65% of our year 8 leave with some sort of scholarship.
Wow.
And yet we're relatively non-selective on entry. And that's because, again, we look at each individual child as they come through the school, try and build our systems as far as possible around them as individuals. And you're getting to know each individual and steering them and almost getting under their skin to find out what makes them tick, and then putting in place what they need, not just in terms of that core learning, but also in terms of them flourishing and thriving as individuals.
Yeah, and also, I guess, if you're a family school and you're attracting families, you are by default, again, going to get a mixed bag of children's abilities, and that's what you want. I mean, you don't want to be a one-trick pony,
That's absolutely it. And we have children that go on to sort of super selective senior schools. We're surrounded by great day schools in the market, and they hoover up 60 or 70% of our pupils. So it's a real broad brush, and I think the school's stronger because of that. And certainly the parent body's relatively cosmopolitan for rural Somerset. It's not a typical sort of rural prep school. And they're looking for that breadth and the opportunities for their children to do lots of different things and try different things out and not be pigeonholed too early as whatever.
Absolutely. No, sure. And I was going to ask, actually, I mean, it's a rather typical question, but senior schools wise, so that's interesting that you've got quite a high percentage going on to day school.
Yeah.
And then a lot going on to, as you say, the sort of leading senior schools around you.
So we've sent to about 40 different schools in the last 5 years, 40 or so.
Gosh, that's amazingly wide.
12 or 13 schools within 45, 50 minutes of All Hallows will take the majority. But we spend a long time, again, working in partnership with parents, thinking about individual children and families and what's best for them in terms of senior schools.
That's an important choice, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, being an independent school, we want to maintain that we're not just feeding them on to a small group of schools, but we encourage parents again to come in, have a coffee and a school flapjack, and sit down and talk about their child and their family, because it's a family decision as well when you're joining a school community. So that's an important part of the journey through the school, that in years, even in years 4, 5, 6, that parents are coming in and just starting to have those conversations. I don't recommend schools, but actually it's building that understanding and narrowing, filtering a field down till we make a really good decision with the parents.
And sadly, that decision's becoming earlier and earlier, isn't it? In the sort of the structure that you're sort of restricted to, if you like, or working to. It's a decision you've got to start looking at in year 4 or 5.
It is, and I think lots of parents are running sort of parallel tracks now because of that. Because again, child development and growth between year 4 and 5, for example, where some of the pre-selections are now taking place for
Yeah.
and 13 is just enormous.
Yeah.
And
Totally.
a child at that end might not be right at 13. And again, part of us working with parents to make sure that that decision continues to be the right one going through. I think the good thing about starting a little bit earlier in pre-assessments is that nobody's waiting now for common entrance results or transfer exams to come.
True.
So we can use them now as a really great learning opportunity in terms of study skills and going through something that looks like GCSEs without pressure. But everybody knows that they're into their first choice senior school before they sit down on that first day of exam week.
Yes, you haven't got that awful sort of pass or fail business at age 12 or 13, have you?
No. So we can do a brilliant bit about, we almost have an A-level afternoon where you come and meet the head teacher, and we go through your results together and talk about your journey through the school. You get to sit in an exam room with those desks in rows and get to feel what that's like. And we talk a lot about how to manage nerves, and again, there's psychology in that. So they're really well prepared for year 9 then, without that anxiety and worry and pressure of, I've got to get 65 to get into the next school. That's not how it works now. And that's got to be a positive thing for those young people as well.
I was about to say, actually, it's very nice to have a positive on the sort of, because I think there's a lot of negative press on the children being assessed and having to go for schools quite so early on, but actually it's quite nice to have a different take on it and a sort of positive start.
I think I do worry that sometimes it's too early, but I like the fact that, and again, there's a huge amount of conversations that I have with my opposite number in a variety of senior schools, and the good senior schools also want to know about how are they socially, what, again, they're asking those really good questions because they're trying to build a group, a team of children in that school, and they want to know everything else that you don't get on a standard question or a reference.
And ultimately, it's one of your greatest roles, isn't it? Safeguarding the children to their next school, so that they are a good fit. I mean, I think the days of parents' vanity and getting children into schools that actually are not the right ones for them are hopefully less and less.
Yes, they are, definitely. And I think that's shown in, I think if we go back 10 or 15 years at All Hallows, that number might have been 12 or 13, 40. And that's because parents are absolutely doing that process, thinking about individual children, which is great. I think it's brilliant.
And I think it's on an earlier theme. I mean, I get the impression that All Hallows sort of believes in children being children for as long as they can be. It gives them the sort of the opportunity just to be, which I think in today's age of micromanaging every minute is so key. Would you agree that that's something that stands out at All Hallows?
I think it's absolutely that. I think the outcomes we get are not at the expense of that process of children growing up at the right time for them, if that makes sense. We've still got, I was laughing one of our year 8s this morning that got out, and it's a beautiful winter day here, frost on the ground, and he got out in shorts. No, well, I'm going to play football at break, so why do I want to put long track? Without looking over his shoulder thinking, what's everybody going to think?
Yeah, well, that's such a key life skill, isn't it? To be happy in your own skin, I think pretty much covers everything.
And that's, again, part of that, the outcomes that we're looking for, that they are happy being individuals at the end of that process and celebrated and feel that they've got a contribution to make. It's more than just being okay with who you are, but it's feeling you're going off to senior school with something to bring.
And do you have, if a prospective parent was looking at schools in the area, do you have, I mean, I think we've touched on a lot of key characteristics, but is there something that you would say that you're head and shoulders either above the rest or, would like to be promoting as your thing?
I think it's a distinctive way of looking at education and child development. I think it is that emphasis on the individual child. We're not a school that puts in place systems and then says, right, you fit in with us.
No.
Try and build that around you. I think there's also the fact that we put well-being and happiness at the base of everything. We believe that great development, that children thriving and flourishing happens when those circumstances are in place.
Sure.
In school, lots of schools would say we do that. I would say we absolutely live that. It's the basis of what we do. And when we're thinking about, I don't know, how many exams children have and the makeup of their curriculum, the baseline for that is about their well-being.
Yeah.
And I think that's absolutely key. We also treat them as whole people. So I think schools are set up very often with their systems where you have pastoral over here and social and academic somewhere else. And we have things like whole child meetings where everybody in a child's life, whether they're their playground supervisor or their tennis coach or part of their academic team, is in a room talking about each individual child, because you need all of that together to understand what's going on and how to get the best out of each young person. And it's amazing who crops up with gems that actually have a real impact. It might be the tennis coach or the games teacher or somebody that they have a one-to-one drama lesson with.
You just pick up on something, yeah.
You know, when I do this, they absolutely flourish. Great, then I'll put that in my classroom. That's fantastic. And how they are socially. You know, if they're not happy socially, if they're struggling in their peer group, that's going to impact upon everything else in life.
Yeah, no, absolutely, of course. And what are your, I mean, you mentioned rugby a little earlier. What are your, apart from education, what are your passions? What do you love doing?
Mine personally?
Yes.
The way I switch off, really, I took up, I played basketball until my sort of mid-20s at quite a high standard. And then, of course, working life and family takes over and you can't give it the commitment that you'd like. So I've been going to the gym for 20 odd years, and I took up Olympic weightlifting.
Wow.
That I sort of now I've got an amazing Jamaican coach who has represented England at about 5 different sports, from netball to shot put to Olympic lifting. And it's just a great way, without having to commit to a team, to have that camaraderie at the end of the day, to go and do something completely different, which is you off.
Absolutely,
so
definitely.
That's certainly something, and just spending time with friends, I think, particularly at the moment, is so important. I've actually found that during lockdown, I've talked with my friends more than I did beforehand.
I've heard a lot of people say that. It's funny, isn't it, that you almost needed to be reliant on technology to sort of FaceTime someone to make the effort to see them, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and it's terrible that that's the case, but I think we've all vowed, because we've all found it helpful in managing the process and for our own mental health, to catch, you know, and share a glass of wine on a Saturday has been absolutely brilliant. So I've certainly put that in the mix as well.
Well, let's hope that's the legacy of this awful time, that you know, the simple pleasures we all actually have highlighted as being very important to us.
Absolutely.
And Trevor, what would be something that perhaps people didn't know about you? I mean, I think we might have just touched on it, but
I think probably that. I think people are really amazed that, and the children love it. I train over in the University of Bath, and we have a tennis program here. So some of the tennis players go off and play in the development squads. Children routinely go in the evenings. They might be playing for Bath Bucks and things at hockey, and they look over the balcony and see their head teacher in the gym, Olympic lifting. And
gives you some serious kudos, I imagine.
Yeah, I mean, that's part of, you know, that I do things that they do, and I don't.
Yes, no, absolutely. Well, it's always funny when you go shopping and the children stumble across a teacher and they're absolutely open mouthed that a teacher should be in the shops. You know,
that's right.
Can't believe that they ever leave school.
Shirt on.
Exactly. Bizarre. And Trevor, if you had a life motto, I guess, or a school motto, if they may overlap, what might it be?
As part of my thesis, I came across the concept that we're all in the state of becoming, is the way that the French philosopher talks about it. You could say every day's a school day, but the idea that the world is constantly changing, that it's complex, that there's no sort of single truth. I think if you go into, I don't know why motorway services are like this, but if you go into the bookshop in a motorway services, it's full of self-help books. Okay. Telling you that if you do this, you will be happy, or your children will turn out in a particular way. And I just don't believe that. I think we continue to adapt and be resilient and evolve. And I think there isn't very often, and again, this comes through into the school, in terms of a one size fits all. I think that's very rarely the case. and you have to be very sure in your principles and have an integrity, but then you have to deal with whatever comes along with those underpinnings. And I think that's the way that I approach life, that change is one of the few things that's absolutely constant, and we have to roll with that. And that's, again, part of the message to the children, that you are going to get it wrong, you are going to make mistakes. We're here to support you, we've got you. What are you going to do differently next time? You know, and that's,
I think the making mistakes thing is so important. And again, sadly, I think today's age is very much about, you know, looking perfect, being perfect, looking as if everything's fine. And actually, in many respects, until you make mistakes, you don't learn from the process. So I think it's a really important lesson to teach.
And, you know, having teachers make mistakes and say, "Oh, I made a mistake. What shall I do differently next time?" Or, you know, doing that reflective process at the end of a session with children about what went well and what didn't, into their teaching as well, is great.
They sound like pretty lucky children in an amazing school. So thank you, Trevor, for your time today. And I'm sorry about the technical glitches, but
Not
we
at all.
there.
And I'm going to go and give my IT chap a socially distanced hug to say thank you.
Oh, well, give him one from me as well. Have a wonderful day, and we'll catch up soon. And again, thank you so much for your time.
Great to meet you. Thanks, Antonio.
And you. Take care, Trevor. Bye-bye.